What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into another installment of the Celtics Talk Weekly Post Game Show. I am your host, Rob Tan. Joined with me is my co-host, Seamus Zaralingo. And guys, the Boston Celtics, it wasn't pretty, but a win is a win. They've found a way to manage to protect the parquet yet again for the 16th straight time this season, as they won against the Toronto Raptors 120-118 on the second night of a back-to-back. Down Jason Tatum, down Kristaps Porzingis, down Al Horford. The Boston Celtics still managed to hold on to their lead. They led big early on throughout most of the game. As you take a look at the lead tracker for tonight, again, Boston, they led by as much as 20 for a majority of this game. After that second quarter, the Celtics really pushed that lead, extended that lead to 20. They held on to it all game. However, the Boston Celtics and the Toronto Raptors, the game was brought to a little bit of a standstill mid on into that third quarter. Seamus, obviously, the Celtics did still find a way to manage to escape tonight with the victory. And at the end of the day, that is the end goal. However, what did you like? What did you dislike? Your thoughts, your opinions, your instant reactions over the Boston Celtics win tonight?
Well, first, we must note that in this game, there was no Jason Tatum. There was no Kristaps Porzingis. There was no Al Horford. And those three players last night against the Detroit Pistons, when there was no Jaylen Brown, who was in the lineup tonight, those three players were absolutely massive for the Celtics last night in their game against the Pistons. And tonight, they're completely absent from the lineup. And the Celtics, they were only 5.5-point favorites coming into this one, and the line kind of moved around throughout the day. However, the Celtics in this game, not too many of us expected a potential blowout performance like we saw for most of this game. And I want to take a lot of positives out of the entire game's performance out of the Celtics, because there was a lot of good to be taken out of this game. However, the team did have a little bit of a rough fourth quarter, and I think a little bit is maybe an understatement, scoring only 21 points in the fourth quarter and, of course, allowing 32 to the Toronto Raptors, being outscored by 11. If the Celtics are going to be a championship level team, they're going to have to finish games in the fourth quarter. Now, I'm going to say this. It's not a concern at this point in time. We've seen the Celtics be able to close out games, and that's actually been one of their strengths this year, is closing out fourth quarter strong. So in this game, to not come out and close the way we've typically seen them close, it's not too surprising considering who's in and out of the lineup right now. But there's a lot of good to be taken out of this game for the first three quarters primarily. And if they just held on to the lead down the stretch, we would be talking about this in a much different manner than we're probably going to end up discussing tonight. But the team down the stretch, you have to still give them some credit for pulling through in another adverse moment where they could have easily let this game go. They were up 20 points. The Raptors chipped away at the lead, and then they ended up taking the lead down the stretch before the Celtics made big play after big play after big play down the stretch. And that's what's a little weird about this one, is you have those big plays down the stretch in which we can look at positively, but then that chip away period negatively. And it's one of those games where it's a win and there's a lot of good out of it, but it's not really a pretty one in any manner whatsoever.
And it goes back to that saying, right? Winning cures everything. In a game like this, in which you were up 20 at home and you allowed the Toronto Raptors to come back and grab a 5-point lead onto you at some point of the game, the win cured it. And fans will not look at this game back in June or May and bookmark it. I'm impressed with how we were able to respond and execute down the stretch, because, again, Toronto's this weird team where they're not really a pushover team. They've obviously struggled. They're kind of a middle of the pack towards the bottom of the conference team that has a bunch of good talent. They're a well-coached basketball team. They're not the best three-point shooting team. And Boston was kind of in this position right now, or tonight, where they were like, listen, we're going to let you shoot them. If you make them, great. If you don't, we're going to blow you out. Through three quarters, Toronto wasn't making them. And then the start of the fourth quarter came around and Toronto started knocking them down. So, when Boston, obviously, if they weren't on the second half of back-to-back, and if they had Jason Tatum, Kristaps Porzingis, and Al Horford playing, and the game went how tonight's game went, I'd be a little bit more concerned, right? It would be a little bit more, okay, what do we need to fix? What do we need to look into? But again, remember last night, Seamus, I told you this. I said, I'm not putting any stock into this Toronto Raptors game. It's another trap game. It's a game in the second night of a back-to-back. You just played an overtime yesterday. The injury report was, as long as an injury report can get almost. And the Celtics, I'm impressed with how they were able to come out and close out this basketball game. I thought Jaylen Brown was great tonight. In his aspects. I think he second half, once Toronto made those defensive adjustments on him, you start to see him turn the ball over a little bit. That happens. I'm not too worried about that because in totality, the Boston Celtics were better with Jaylen Brown on the court. 12 points better with Jaylen Brown on the court versus him off the court. I think that was pretty apparent when, Toronto went on that run with him off the floor in the start of the fourth quarter and he checked back in, and this team was able to regain its composure and collectiveness and respond back into the proper manner. Luke Cornett was phenomenal. And that brings us to our player of the game, Seamus. Luke Cornett. I believe this is the second player spotlight player of the game from us. 20 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 blocks tonight for the big 9 of 11 from the floor. Big man. Interesting start, I want to say, Seamus, from head coach Joe Mazzulla. Obviously, Luke Cornett has not played since December 12th, in and out of the lineup with an injury. He has been healthy scratches with, kind of emergence of, Kaida, who has seen a majority of that third string big man minutes tonight, Seamus. But however, tonight, Joe went to Cornett to start the game. And what did you like from Luke tonight?
Well, a lot of people question Luke Cornett coming into this game and why the Celtics started him over Kada. And I was looking at it, a little bit deeper, and I was thinking maybe, there's a reasonable explanation for all of this, but I was just looking at both of their size, before this game, and some people underrate Luke Cornett's size. He's a little bit bigger than Kada. They're about the same size, but just a little bit bigger. They're both freaks of nature. But Luke Cornett is so good, and they kind of highlighted it on the broadcast, in his positioning on both ends of the floor, when he's setting screens defensively, when he's down low in the perimeter, when he's helping, when he's not helping, who he's helping to, and where his length and size is being presented on the floor. And ultimately, people don't understand basketball. There's a lot of timing involved. There's a lot of positioning involved. It's simply, I wish I had a whiteboard right here with me right now, but some things within players' games, simply being in one spot in opposed to another spot of where they consistently go, could change an entire thing within a rotation for a player, whether it's on offense or on defense, depending on whether you're helping on defense or for a big man catching a lob, running the pick and roll, if you're a wing on the perimeter, anywhere. But on either end of the floor, positioning and timing is such a big thing, and Luke Cornett is one of the best Celtics in regards to that at the big man position, and his consistency at that position is giving me confidence that there is not a depth issue at the big man spot at all. Could the Celtics use another body off the bench? Sure, but I don't think it's going to come at the big man position anymore, for the fact of we're seeing them manage Al Horford and Porzingis. Right now, that's going very smoothly. They're playing consistent minutes in a consistent range, and also they're not playing every single game. They are taking some rest. Of course, both of them missed tonight's game, but then you have Luke Cornett coming in. He plays phenomenally, and you also have Kada as your fourth guy, who has put up a couple of double-doubles this season and looked like a serviceable big man for the Celtics. So the fact the Celtics have all this big man depth right now at this point in the season, after we were talking about them having none, is pretty impressive, and Luke Cornett is surely a big part of that, and he showed exactly why tonight.
I thought Luke was phenomenal tonight, and a lot of credit to Luke because he hasn't been in the lineup for some time now, approaching 3 weeks here. Obviously dealing with that injury, and then he comes back, and then all of a sudden, Seamus Kaida, here he is. He's playing good basketball, and comes in and he stayed ready. And I think that's what you need your bench players to do on a championship caliber team. Stay ready. When your name is called, be ready. I mean, honestly, a bunch of guys have done it, but Brissett and Pritchard and Stevens, those guys who are at the end of the bench, they're ready. Cornett did it tonight, and a lot of props goes to him. I thought he was a key reason as to why the Celtics were able to hold on to this win. He had a couple big time plays down the stretch. That alley-oop from Jaylen Brown to eventually won the Celtics the game, and then on the other end, that blocked three against Dennis Schroeder to allow the Celtics to have the opportunity to win the game. So Luke Cornett made winning plays tonight. And, when you're down both of your starting big men, or you're starting and backup big in Horford and Porzingis, have the luxury to have these guys like Kaida and like Cornett who are able to step up into these roles and produce at a high level, is a big time luxury that not a lot of teams have. And, I think this game and this performance from Luke, a lot of teams, a lot of players, and a lot of people around the basketball world believe the Boston Celtics need to go out there and make a move. And it's nice as Celtics fans, and I'm sure being in the Celtics locker room, to kind of quiet some of that noise down in games like this, because at the end of the day, winning cures everything, Seamus, like I said earlier. And, when you're playing well and this basketball team is winning games, there's not a lot you can say in terms of the Celtics needing to go out and find another big man. Because if Cornett and Kaida are going to continue to play the way they are, I see no reason to mess up this team's chemistry and to go a different direction. And it's just, I've been very impressed with Cornett. And someone else who I've been impressed with, and I mean, you already know who I'm going to say. You have the little smirk on your face because we both know we're in queue, we're in connection. I'm sure everyone watching and listening knows who's about to be brought up. Mr. Derek White, all-star D White, because this guy, he had a rough shooting night. But like I said with Tatum last night, that's a Rondo. I know that's a Rondo jersey.
So you can see the Adidas logo on it too. So he was never part of the Adidas.
It works though. It works.
Anytime you guys see the jersey turned that way, it might be another player. It's like, sorry, Grant Williams, my 12 jersey when I got Grant Williams to present the heart to me in New Orleans, that was a Rozier jersey. It's like, I just had this jacket on, though. You can't see the back.
Well, however, Derek White, in all seriousness, Seamus, Derek White has been big time for us. I mean, again, tonight, 21 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists. It doesn't stop there. 3 steals, 2 blocks. Just every big time bucket tonight for the C's went down the stretch. It feels like every game he can't top himself, and there's no way he tops himself. But Derek White, yet again, just topped himself tonight. Poor shooting. He still found a way to produce. And that's what great players do, Seamus. How has Derek White been able to just ascend into this role that we're seeing him ascend into with the Boston Celtics this season?
Well, Derek White is a player that's always in the right place at the right time. No matter what end of the floor he's in, he's always in the right place at the right time. And also, mentality is such a big part of basketball as well. And Derek White always has the correct mentality when he has the ball in his hands and on defense as well. He's always attacking on both ends of the floor, whether it's at the point of the attack, on the defensive end of the floor, or with the ball in his hands. He's not a player that sits there, looks around, waits, dribbles a ton. He's always attacking. I noticed that first thing off when he joined the Celtics. Now, he obviously had a nice career with the Spurs before joining the Celtics, but within the Celtics offense back in 2022, that's something that stood out to me right away, is the fact every time he got the ball within the Celtics offense, it was a quick, decisive move with the ball, whether it was driving to the basket, passing to somebody else, and that just puts defenses on their toes more and more and more. And ultimately, what teams want to do on offense is shift defenses to different sides of the floor so they can get different actions open and different shots open, different opportunities open on different ends of the floor where not too many defenders are, because they're all shift to one side or the other. And Derek White, with his quick, decisive movements, he's so good at putting defenses on their toes and just collapsing everything that a defense wants to do with the team, because when you're quick like that, defenses have to react. On offense, you know exactly what you're going to do. When you're decisive, you know exactly what you're going to do. You can make that strong move with intent, and that is way more powerful than on defense when you are simply guessing. And that's what makes defenders and some of the league's top defenders, we have one, Drew Holiday, their job so impressive, because it's ultimately a massive guessing game, and positioning again is just so big. And the fact Derek White can consistently attack defenses the way he does without really having, he doesn't have Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and we can mention too Kyrie level skill. He doesn't have that ability, but he has the ability to consistently attack and have that mentality of this is what I have to do to break down a defense. Because a lot of players, they just get wrapped up in the mental bind of, all right, just thinking too much. All right, what's next? Who do I go to? What do I do now? And we saw that a lot with the Pistons team last night. But this Celtics team, who's all in their primes, specifically Derek White, they're completely different. than that. And Derek White is really one of the best, if not the best, Celtics at just quick, decisive movement on both ends of the floor and attacking with intent.
It feels like he's never making the wrong play. I was actually talking about this with my dad the other night. After the Pistons game, we were talking to each other, and we're thinking, it's just when the ball's in Derek White's hands, you just it you're confident and you trust that the right play will be made. If he's taken the shot, you trust that it's going to be the best shot available. And if he's kicking out and he's passing, I think there's a general consensus around the Celtics right now that it's the right pass. It's to the open guy, and I think to have a player like that has been super special. And I really believe that Derek White is the key to the Celtics. Obviously, you got Porzingis, Brown, and Tatum and Holiday, who are so important in their own respectable individual ways. I mean, we saw Jaylen Brown's ability to attack the rim has really just that was displayed in his value last night against Detroit. And then, Tatum's and Porzingis versatility has also been, their value has been displayed. But I think Derek White, when you talk about what makes the Celtics and what puts them over the edge, you think Porzingis, you think White, because not many teams have a Porzingis or a Derek White. Those elite role players who are fringe all-star guys who are just so egoless and so willing to make the right play and put their team in a better position to play basketball. Derek White's the guy that we saw so content and willing to sit on the bench for the last 5 minutes of every game last year. Even though he shouldn't have been, and he was good enough to close those games. White, that's just who the player he is, and that's the guy he is. He's a winner and he's a champion. He will be a champion. And Derek White, you can't say enough good about him. And another guy that I think he needs his flowers as well as his running mate Drew Holiday. Drew, I think, has been the epitome of, you can't just look at the stat sheet to say you had a good game. Because I think Drew's ability this year to just kind of keep this team under control has really, really been good. And I think it showed again tonight when him and Brown checked back into the game when the Raptors were making the run. He has that presence, Seamus, of just this like, Drew's in, take a deep breath, we're good. And, this is a guy who his usage has dropped incredibly since being on Milwaukee. He was the second gun on the number 1 seed last year. Now he's arguably the 5th option for this team. And again, class act about it. You haven't heard a word about him. So willing. How has Drew Holiday been able to kind of just refrain into this just completely different role from second option superstar to 5th option key to a championship team?
I believe this conversation kind of goes in line with both Derek White and Drew Holiday. And I want to highlight this
Right.
for Derek White, too, is that both of these guys aren't afraid to insert themselves in the right moments. And as well as that, they're not really looking to be within that spotlight either. So the combination of that, not being afraid and not really also wanting the spotlight either, there's two levels of that. You can want the spotlight, but ultimately not be a player who we've seen other teams where maybe it should be more of this guy than this guy, and the chemistry doesn't work out. I'm sure there's a team like that out there right now. There's teams every year like that out there. And this Celtics team, the fact that those guys for the Celtics, the role players who, let's face it, these are the most high level role players, starters in the league right now. These guys being unselfish and also not
Right.
being afraid to attack in the moments in which they need to, that just it binds everything together for the Celtics so seamlessly. And for Drew Holiday specifically, I watched the Pistons game over again last night. There are a lot of unconventional moves within Drew Holiday's game just to get a bucket, just to make the right plays. And again, it's all about being in the right spots and attacking in moments where it might not be the most ideal scenario, but a lot of plays in basketball, when they go awry, players ultimately need to overcome that adversity and make something happen off of what is ultimately chaos. And Drew Holiday is so good at doing that in basketball and for the Celtics team. And to have that on the Celtics roster, I think is very, very valuable because there's another guy we've been seeing. We saw the last decade really be he did it for us, Marcus Smart. Of course, now he's gone. It feels like Drew Holiday, although he's not as maybe crazy intense as Marcus
Right.
Smart is in terms of his emotions, right? Drew Holiday
Right.
is a little bit more reserved. I still think he brings that level of calmness within the chaos for the
I I
Celtics.
I think I mean, I love Marcus, you know that, but I think he brings another level of calmness and collectiveness. I think Marcus struggled in that aspect at times. And I think, you know, there you saw some problems with Marcus last year. I mean, considering the fact that he was the guy to take the last shot to potentially send the Celtics to a game 7 back in Boston on the brink of history, I think tells us a lot about where the Celtics were at with Marcus Smart. And I don't think Drew Holiday wants to take that shot. He will if he needs to, but that's a shot that Drew Holiday knows that needs to go to Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. And that's important when you're trying to win a championship. That the knowing where the shot needs to go. So again, just so much credit to Holiday because he is a guy that could be contributing at a much higher volume. And he's so willing to not do that. So something I've noticed recently between White and Holiday is whatever they need for it to do for us to win, they'll do it. And that's big time, I think, for a championship team. And something I also want to talk about is the bench. Bench has been balling, big time. And in different ways, Seamus, before the season started, something I said with this bench was it's interesting because a lot of people think, oh my God, well, the Celtics need more scoring. The Celtics bench isn't good. They need to revamp this bench. And, you know, the scoring part might be true, but I think there's an aspect to the Celtics bench that's actually really dynamic because, yes, you don't have a lot of scoring off this bench for the Celtics. However, you don't really need a lot of scoring off the bench for the Celtics because of the scoring you're going to get from guys like Brown, White, Holiday. And tonight it was Cornette. So you had that one guy off the bench to help you, which is really what you need in games like this. However, what you do get from this bench, you get 7 rebounds from O'Shea Brissett in 15 minutes. You get 9 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists from Peyton Pritchard. You get 9 rebounds from Sam Hauser. Those are players making and contributing into winning ways. Yes, you don't have the 6 man of the year averaging 15 points per game in Malcolm Brogdon. However, this team doesn't need that. They don't need the 6 man of the year, Seamus. They need guys that understand that when they're in the game, they need to bring energy, they need to bring effort, they need to bring hustle. And you saw that with the '08 team, right? Eddie House, PJ Brown, Sam Cassell, James Posey. Those guys weren't going out there giving you 20. They weren't giving you 15, but they were giving you timely shots, big time hustle plays, and just great effort. And I think the Boston Celtics, could they add an extra bench piece? For sure. I won't say no. I'd throw around a couple second-round picks to bring in a guy to help this bench out for sure, right? If you can get addition without subtraction, hell yeah, go for it. However, I mean, right now, I'm seeing a bench that is producing and they are staying ready, Seamus.
This is ultimately a bench where I feel as if you really need one of four players to step up. And usually Al Horford, he's on the bench. He's coming off the bench as a consistent sixth man, although we could argue like who's the real sixth man producing, blah, 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 right? But he is the sixth man off the bench, and he's
Right.
usually putting up a consistent production every single game. But after that, it's Hauser, it's Pritchard, it's Cornette, and then it's usually someone in that group of Banton, Brissett, Stevens, Kada, and Kada. He's of course received his run as of late in abundance, but it's usually that level of player who we can maybe see some production out of. But usually one of those players, Pritchard, it's in different moments of the game. If you can get something early out of Pritchard or late out of Pritchard, and then Hauser, if he can come in, hit a couple of threes in the third quarter or in moments of the game where the offense might need a spark. And I just feel as if the Celtics bench is certainly a lot farther along than where they were at the start of the season. And Sam Hauser in particular, I mean, he's a legitimate NBA forward all of a sudden. He's not just some, Duncan Robinson level of shooter where that's all he does on both ends of the floor. He's producing and he's becoming closer and closer to that player. Now, I hope the Celtics never give him $90 million one day
Right.
like the Heat did with Duncan Robinson. But
Right.
Sam Hauser is ultimately producing like an NBA level of forward on both ends of the floor and not just
Absolutely.
holding the persona of I just shoot threes and that's all I do. He's doing it both defensively and offensively. There's more complexity to his game, running off screens, dribble handoffs, all of that for Sam Hauser. And the bench, I think in total, there could be another body coming for the Celtics later on down the line, but it's not
Right.
really something we're worried about too, for the fact of look how much offensive talent resides in the starting lineup. you have the ability to stagger Brown, stagger Tatum, stagger all of these other guys, Brown or White and Holiday, Brown and Tatum, all of those guys. They're essentially, I don't want, there's not too much overlap in skill, but there's some overlap in skill to where you can stagger those guys and make lineups look somewhat similar and produce what they're trying to do both offensively and defensively, depending on whoever
Right.
they're playing at any given moment. But all of the offensive talent within the starting lineup culminated with the bench right now. This is why this Celtics team is 16-0 at home. They're 25-6 on the season through 31 games. And right now they're on a roll. I know we've seen a couple of games in which we maybe scuffled against some lesser opponents, but we have to remember too, not everyone's in the lineup, and it's not for bad reason either. A lot of these guys are simply managing their minutes right now. It's not because of actual injury at all. And so
Right.
where the Celtics team is at going into now the December 31st game against the Spurs coming up on New Year's Eve. I mean, this is perfect right now for where we're at the end of December. Could there be another move later on down the line? Sure, but where the Celtics are currently at in the schedule, I think what we're seeing from the bench and the starting unit, this is a squad that could potentially, even without a move, go really, really far.
Yeah, I mean, I think they haven't played their best basketball yet, by any means. They haven't. Last year, it felt like, okay, they've played their best basketball. That's just not the case this year. And again, I do think that there's some problems you could nitpick with this team, as there are problems with every NBA team. No team. There's no such thing as a perfect NBA team. Maybe the two. There's one maybe all time. The 72-10 Bulls. Not even the 73-9 Warriors were perfect, as you saw in the finals. So there's no such thing as a perfect NBA team. However, the idea is how can you get as close to perfect as possible. And I think if you look at the Boston Celtics, what needs to happen, I think the turnovers have been really good recently. They've actually done a great job. They struggled tonight against the Pistons and last night against last night against the Pistons and tonight against the Raptors. They had 17 tonight to Toronto's 4. So again, you look into, okay, well, why are these games getting close? Why are we struggling? The turnovers the past 2 games weren't great. Again, when you have guys in and out of the lineup, tendencies and spacing and timing still gets tweaked a little bit. So bookmark that, circle that, the turnovers over the next couple games for the Celtics. However, this is a great stretch for the Celtics here. These next couple games, because they've had the toughest schedule so far. They've had all these rigorous games. They had that West Coast road trip. Those games against Minnesota, and we've seen Philly a decent amount. We've seen the Knicks a bunch. We've seen the Bucks already. But now it's like, okay, well, take a deep breath, Celtics fans, because right now they have a little bit of not, you should never take a team lightly. We saw with the Pistons the other night, but they have an opportunity to grow a little bit better. They have San Antonio, who's currently 5 wins. That's on Christmas Eve. Or I'm sorry, New Year's Eve. Christmas Eve already happened. And then you get this good test, right? You got a bunch of these games against some subpar basketball teams. You got this great test on January 2nd after a 2-day rest against the Oklahoma City Thunder on the road. You've struggled on the road. That's a great game to kind of see what this team can do. Oklahoma is honestly, Seamus, could be considered a carbon copy of what Boston kind of has created with this, super dynamic, long, athletic, 5-out basketball team. You got Shai running the show, who's your Jason Tatum. You have your, Jaylen Brown and Chet Holmgren. You could also compare him to Kristaps Porzingis, right? And then you have these other stars like your Lou Dort and your Jalen Williams. I think they have 2 of them or something. So they have this great team, and then obviously they got Josh Giddey as well. And so they have some talent down there in Oklahoma. So that's a great test for Boston. Then you got Utah, and it's a game where you got 3 days rest, right? You got to see Utah at home, so you get to come back home, get your legs back, have a couple practices back at the Arbac Center, and then you play Indy back to back. So it's like that little stretch where it's like it's a deep breath for Celtics fans. And then actually we this is actually a 4-game stretch. It's kind of rough. You got Indy twice, and then you got Minnesota, and then you got Minnesota on January 10th, and then you got Milwaukee on the second night of a back-to-back, January 11th. Minnesota being at home, Milwaukee being on the road. They're giving us, see, you know what, NBA, you got to be better. You're giving us Milwaukee on the road on TNT. after having to play the Minnesota Timberwolves, the best defense in the NBA, at home on January 10th. Be better, NBA. Be better. Don't set us
To
up for
be fair,
failure.
the NBA might have been anticipating that. It's like, oh, you have the Timberwolves on night one and the Bucks on night two. It's like we used to live in those days where the Timberwolves and Suns and
Right. But you should
they
never
used
you
to
should
be.
never schedule Celtics Bucks. Neither of those teams should ever be on back-to-backs. You should always allow those teams. You want those two teams at the best of their, that we saw it last year. So the Bucks played the Celtics. Celtics played the Bucks on the second half of back-to-back, and Boston blew it out by 40, which I'm not complaining about. Give it to the Bucks, not us.
Yeah, I mean, the schedule, it's weird. We do have, it's touted as the easiest schedule throughout the rest of the season after Christmas. And we have the best record, which everybody was looking at that going, all right, there could be something special brewing here. But ultimately, looking at the schedule, there are always some schedule quirks, which you just pointed out there with the Minnesota Milwaukee game, how we faced Milwaukee on the second night of a back to back on the road after facing Minnesota at home. There are some schedule quirks that make the schedule harder with all the turnarounds and also some of the opponents. Like looking at another one, now there is some time in between these games, but Sunday, Monday, in late January, we play Houston and then Dallas back to back. And then later in the week, we play another road game in Miami. So you're essentially talking about the Celtics being in Miami from Monday night late, so basically Tuesday morning early,
Right.
to all the way on Thursday or Friday, rather, against, or Thursday, yeah, rather against the Miami Heat. So that's kind of a tough little turnaround. You're on the road for a long time, and then you all of a sudden go to a city in which I think NBA players like visiting every time they go, the Miami, Florida. So there are some tough turnarounds within the Celtics schedule, and there are some tough opponents as well. And we just look at this simple number of, oh, this is going to be an easy schedule the rest of the way. But the Celtics ultimately need to be engaged for each and every one of these games, because even looking at some of the games coming up on the schedule, I look at the Utah game. They have a couple of former Celtics maybe looking for some revenge. Danny Ainge, of course, brought in all of those players. They eventually, at one point in time, they signed a contract next to Danny Ainge. Like, I feel like there might be some motivation. Let's play for Danny Ainge against his former team, maybe from somebody like Kelly Olynyk, maybe, who knows. Against the Oklahoma City Thunder, I feel like that's going to be a game where Chet Holmgren goes crazy and Brown and Tatum, like they might have a couple of turnovers. And then that's when Twitter goes nuts and starts questioning a lot of things that just are completely complete fallacy at this point in NBA time. But there are some tough games on the schedule for the Celtics, no doubt, coming up. And I think during this stretch, the fact that they came out with two back-to-back wins at the Garden for these two games, the Raptors and the Celtics, that's a pretty good sign moving forward, because you could have easily marked one of these as schedule losses. And I was on here last night talking with Ian afterwards about how there are a lot of benchmarks that 2 years ago, right? 2 years ago on the Celtics, the 21-22 Celtics, for us to really confirm that they were a legitimate playoff contender, a team that could make a run, they had to hit all these benchmark moments on the
Right.
schedule. And time after time again, they responded. And we came in here and went, wow, that was kind of a schedule loss. And they come out and completely respond. Or right after a bad loss, they come out and completely respond. Well, these last two games, the Celtics could have easily taken a loss to the now 28 straight loss Pistons. Instead, with no Jaylen Brown in the lineup, who's been one of the best Celtics, if not the best Celtic as of late. Man, I don't know, Derek White has been getting a lot of praise, but Jaylen Brown has been really good as well. He's not in the lineup. That could have been an easy loss if the team completely folds when they're down 21. And then coming into tonight, no Tatum, no Porzingis, no Horford. It kind of seems like one of those games back to back. Oh, we don't have our guys. Raptors, they're 12-18 coming in. They're motivated right now to get a couple more wins. And we come out, we grab a huge lead. It's not a blowout. It's way closer than we want it to be, but it's ultimately a win. And the fact both of these were wins for the Celtics, that's kind of like a little benchmark for the team, that they were able to overcome that adversity and put up two wins here at the Garden before they go on the stretch where things just aren't going to be all that easy for them.
Right. And, I think what's been so impressive with this team in terms of, this schedule gauntlet that they've had is you look at December, Seamus, and they're 11-2 in this gauntlet that you could consider December has been. They've had one game or two games. San Antonio will be their third. The last three games actually of December have been their three easiest. Every other team has been above 500. They started off, they played Indiana, they played New York, they played Cleveland twice, Orlando twice. Then they that West Coast road trip that consisted of Golden State, Sacramento, Los Angeles, both Los Angeles teams, and they were 11-2. Both losses were winnable games. That Golden State game should have been a win. Should have been a win. And obviously that Indiana game was this weird, an in-season tournament game that you didn't really know what was going to happen. And Indiana wanted it really, really badly. So it's like, if you look at how the Celtics have been playing against these really good teams in a month in which is arguably Seamus been our most inconsistent health month we've had this year. You've had Porzingis miss time and Horford miss time and Brown's been missing some time. And then Tatum went down with that little ankle sprain and he missed some time. And, we still went out against Sacramento and shelled them by 30. So it's like this month, I think, showed me a lot of what this team can be. We've beaten the bad teams, which we struggled with last year, and we're beating the good teams, which we also were good at last year. We're beating the good teams up until, you see the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference Final, then you run into a wall sometimes. But it's a different team, and they're showing that and they're proving that. And this year, I've told myself that I'm going to be super realistic with the Boston Celtics because I think there were factors that I missed and I was blinded with last year. And I mentioned the 3-point shooting and how that was a concern, but after game 30, our best basketball was far behind us. And I truly believe that this season we're just starting to get into our best basketball. And I think that's really important because again, so much of what the NBA is and so much what the playoffs are is who's hot when the playoff time rolls around. Come April, who is the hot, who's got the hot hand. And again, that's partly why you saw Miami turn it on because, once April rolls around, that team gets hot. And I think the Boston Celtics goal right now should be every step, every pass, every dribble, every jump shot should be to be improving into eventually getting back to that mountain. Because again, you mentioned opportunity and this weird scheduling and in these benchmarks that the Celtics teams need to hit. I think December was the first true benchmark that they've hit in which when things get tough and when players are in and out of the lineup and you got tough matchups on back-to-backs on the road in the West Coast, how are you going to respond? And honestly, Seamus, I don't know about you, but I'm really happy with how they've responded in this month.
Undoubtedly. I mean, you can't really trash them on anything this entire month. You can say the Pacers lost and the Warriors lost, but
yeah.
I mean, those are really just the more so the Golden State loss than anything because that's a game they controlled, and it really looked like late in the fourth quarter. There were about 4 minutes left. It kind of seemed like, we're just going to walk away with this one. And then all of a sudden it was tied, and we're like, oh, we're going to overtime. And then couldn't really find our footing in overtime at all. That Indiana game, it was back and forth the entire game. That was really one of the games of the season in Indiana in front of that crowd. And I'm still remorse I didn't go to that game because, that really was in season tournament semifinal. Was the first semifinal game out of all of them. That was a different playoff like atmosphere, I will say. Well, it technically was the playoffs, in season tournament playoffs, if we want to term it that. But the Celtics lose that game. They lose the Warrior game. But outside of that, just perfect. And again, I've mentioned this on the broadcast many, many times this month. Well, at least since Christmas. The Celtics haven't had any national TV games outside of Christmas, the Warriors game, and the Pacers game this month. You could say the 76ers game that was on December 1st. We beat the Sixers. But all of these games in which the Celtics are just completely whooping opponents, doing it efficiently, all of these guys are showing out. Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, even Jason Tatum. Let's throw him in there on some nights. I know his shooting isn't all that efficient all the time. We have a collective fan base problem with his shot selection, but the fact he can still put up 31, 7, and 10 and us have a problem still needs to be mentioned within that group of players. All of these players doing what they're doing right now on the Celtics in December, it's like no one's really talking about us. And I went on IG earlier too, and I kind of recorded a video and was going, we are a little bit boring because of how good we are. There's really no problems to fix with the Celtics. There's no one thing you can look at and go,
Right.
wow, this is just such a detriment to this team, or this needs to be improved upon, or there's really nothing in that regard. And this team is boring in a good way. And this entire stretch in December, you could easily look at the schedule going into December and pick out way more losses than just the two
Oh
we
yeah.
came up with. We just went on a West Coast road trip where we blew the first game in Golden State. The next night, it looks like we're going to lose. It's 23-11 to start the game. Jaylen Brown goes nuts. We go nuts without Jason Tatum. The team takes off, blows out Sacramento. They go into the Clippers' home. No Kawhi, but the Clippers are on a run right now. Completely blow them out. The Lakers, honestly, most of that game we led too. Like that, outside of halftime, really it was tied at halftime, or we had a 1 point lead at halftime. So everybody got to sit on their couches at Christmas and looked at, oh yeah, halftime report, the Celtics and the Lakers, they're 1 point apart. But for the most part, that game was really a 10-point plus game for the Celtics for most of that contest. And what they're doing right now, they're just so good that they're boring. And this is where it's like you can't say enough about this team, but also at the same
Right.
time,
Right.
the fact you can't say enough, but at the same time, all that you're saying is just a lot of good praise for the Boston Celtics. And we're going to have to, of course, sustain this all the way up until April, which of course could make us a little bit weary, but then that's putting us in like doom and gloom stage. It's, oh, can we do this? Can we do that? It's until we don't see it. This is what the team is. And right now in December, we're at a perfect spot going into
And you know
January.
what?
Almost one more game.
I think what was also really impressive was that little 4 game doubleheader we had with the Cavs and the Magic. That's like a playoff like situation the Celtics were in, right? Where it's like you're seeing the same team 2 times back to back at home, almost like game 1 and 2. The first game is the feel out game. Celtics won the first game both against the Cavs and the Magic. Second game is the adjustment game. Celtics won both of those in a better fashion than they did in the first game. So it's like that also showed me something that last year, I hate to keep bringing up last year, but it's what this team is being compared to because of how much of a change this team went through. They probably go 2-2 in that little stand. They probably or 3-1 probably. I don't know. If something tells me last year's team splits it against Cleveland and splits it against Orlando, or loses both to Cleveland and then wins both against Orlando. So it's like that also being able to consistently perform throughout the month has really, 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 I think, been impressive. And you got a great test. Christmas Eve, you got to see Wembenyama versus the Celtics. Our first time seeing this, the biggest prospect since LeBron. It's been fun. I'll tell you what. This has been a fun uh, season so far. 25-6 a month. You lost 2 games in which were both winnable games, and you haven't gotten you know bitched around yet. Excuse my language, but you haven't. I think Orlando, the first game was weird because they just really tossed us around after that first quarter. But other than that, Seamus, it's been a great month, and the Celtics continue to do that tonight against Toronto. So obviously, before we close out, where are you at? Your final thoughts? Something we didn't get to touch on that you really wanted to talk about tonight with the Celtics.
Well, I mean, I kind of talked. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of stuff I could talk about in regards to some of the reactionary content that comes out when a player may put up a certain shooting performance, or when a player turns the ball over however many times, because I'm sure I'm going to log off this program in a couple of moments when we get off here. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of slack on social media for Jaylen Brown turning the ball over 7 times
7 times.
tonight. And there was a lot of
Right.
slack for Jason Tatum shooting 11 of 31 last night. And I believe he was 2 of 11 from three as well. I think our fan base just needs to be a little bit more positive in what some of our players have done before and what their capabilities truly are. Because really looking at Tatum's performance last night, he makes 4 more shots. He's 15 of 31. Now, obviously, that changes his scoring outcome a lot. He probably doesn't have 31 points at that point. He probably has a lot more, maybe even 40. However, if he makes a couple more shots, he's all over Twitter. He's all over Instagram. He's all over the
Right.
NBA's page. And instead, it's Jason Tatum TikTok meme. It's Jason Tatum doing the TikTok dance, the guy who looks like Jason Tatum. And it's like, I know that Jason Tatum in big games and big moments, he can come up clutch. He can come up and have one of the most efficient games we've ever seen. And this is ultimately December, and I want to see the team. Of course, everyone wants to see the team, and I'm not making excuses for the team. I want to see this team continuously build championship habits throughout the year, and so I'm not going to excuse certain habits that this team can form in regards to chucking up shots. However, I will say I believe some of that as the season goes on will improve as we get into more and more important games for standing purposes or for later on down the line playoff purposes when that time comes due. So I think the fan base, there's a little bit, and this is really, I feel like it's the diehard crowd at this point in time. It's December, just off
Right.
Christmas. We're gonna have a lot of people later on down the year when it's only baseball and it's basketball and hockey playoff moment and there's no football anymore. We're gonna have a lot more people looking at the Celtics. But for right now, it's all the diehards just nitpicking the team, I feel like. And there are a lot of positive aspects to take away from this team. And it doesn't just reside within Derek White. It resides within a lot of other players as well, particularly Brown and Tatum, even though on some nights some of their stat lines might have a couple of blemishes. I think this team collectively as well as individually is playing tremendous at this point in time. So moving forward, I'm satisfied with where the Celtics team is at. I know some people may have some critiques, but as the year moves on, we have a lot more games left. They still need to sustain themselves, and there's still a lot more time for things to develop one way or the other. And tonight, they come out with a win regardless of whoever has how many turnovers or whatever blemishes occur on the stat line, and that's just what you want to see out of the Celtics team.
I think I just want to make sure that Jaylen Brown feels the love and appreciation that Boston is showing him. I really want to make sure. This is a guy that was ridiculed, that was scrutinized, that was hated all summer long. Left hands, this, left hand, that. Just he heard everything in the book. He got paid $304 million. At times, it felt like he was unloved by the city. He put in so much work, and this guy has gotten so much better every single year of his career, and he has done that again. The growth of Jaylen Brown. I'm not even talking off the court because what he does for the community off the court is also phenomenal. But on the court, is just been awesome to watch. To see this guy get drafted with the third pick and come in as a rookie and, teeter with an Eastern Conference Finals appearance as a rookie in and out of the lineup. And then to, go through the 2019 season where it was such a bumpy year and he found himself on the bench. And this dude has just still just kept his head up and has just never caused a problem and has just always has been just such a great teammate and guy, and it's such an honor and so fun to watch this man. And as much love as Tatum gets, it feels like sometimes Jaylen Brown, it's not in the shadows, but it's so easy to love Tatum and it's so easy to love Brown. But right now, I just want to appreciate Jaylen Brown because I really hope everyone and every Celtics fan and every basketball fan can appreciate what this man is doing right now. The growth, the person, the player is awesome. I love Jaylen, and I think the city of Boston loves Jaylen Brown. So my final thoughts tonight on this, December 29th night against the Toronto Raptors is how much Jaylen Brown and how awesome of a man and player in person Jaylen Brown is, because I love Jaylen Brown. But guys, again, thank you. But again, guys,
Agreed.
thank you so much for joining us in live here tonight. The Boston Celtics came away with their 16th straight home victory. Seamus 16 and I'm loving it. Everyone's loving it. Boston's loving it. The players are loving it. The coaching staff, Mike Gorman, Scal, what's not to love? 120 to 118 versus the Toronto Raptors. They come away second out of a back-to-back. They got it done. They play on New Year's Eve, December 31st at 7 o'clock on the road in San Antonio against the big-time superstar rookie Victor Wembanyama. You can catch us back here live for post-game live. We'll have you covered after the final buzzer. I'm Rob. Next to me is my boy Seamus. Guys, thank you so much for all the love and the support you've been showing. And until next time, go Seas.